The cut on the bandsaw was successful, and you can see after we made the first cut, I taped the pattern down over the edge to tape onto the cut side here. I only did that on half of it, the other half then I cut off, and that's where we're at now. So we're going to remove the tape and the pattern. And what I've also done is I've put the waste pieces back in the mold, and before we put the blank back in the mold, we're going to line the mold with plastic, and the only part that's going to be epoxied is going to be the blank itself. We're not going to do any more epoxying out here. What we use to line the mold is just a clear garbage bag, or in this case a lawn and garden bag. You want to make sure that there's also, before I put this plastic in here, I took the air gun and blew any dirt or dust out from the inside of the mold here. We don't want it holding the piece up and sucking epoxy down in. That looks pretty good. And the other thing we have to make certain that we do is put this thing in the way it came out, because that's going to be important. I think this is the side that goes at that end. So we're going to turn that around just so that we have that. Yes, I think that's correct. Now what we're going to do is take the air gun and we're going to blow the dust off of here. You can see where the dust has accumulated from the saw. Part of the reason the dust accumulates there is just natural fall, but also when the saw hits the epoxy, it creates a static, and the epoxy attracts the dust. Now we're going to try and put this back in. It's amazing how plans in theory work pretty well. There we go. Okay, here's the thinking so far. We were looking at doing this and somehow putting something underneath here to prevent the epoxy from going under. But the amount of work it would take to solve that problem would probably more than pay for the epoxy that we'd end up wasting in here and here. There is another problem, however. Over here it tips off like this, and so does the waste. So we've got to find a way of holding this plastic up like this so the epoxy doesn't push out over here and we waste a bunch. So I'm still working on that. I'm probably going to put some wood in here just to hold the plastic up. So that so the epoxy won't go where we don't want it. But the other thing we have to keep in mind is when we're holding that plastic up, we can't be any higher than the mold itself, because we're going to be stretching a piece of plastic over here to keep the epoxy clean while it dries. All these little things. So that's what we're going to do next, is cut some pieces and put them in there, and probably shape them so they fit perfectly, or at least so they hold up the plastic on the one hand, but don't compromise the plastic being stretched across the top. Although it's no big deal, actually. It isn't really a big deal. Okay, here's the solution we're going to use. I have from my other molds, I have these bands, various diameters. This one is 18 inches inside diameter, and I'm just putting that here like this. It just touches the mold all the way around. It's not absolutely critical to do that, but over here I'm then spreading the plastic out beyond that ring, and just like that, and it'll create that little barrier we need to raise the epoxy up over here. Not so critical here, but because it's a ring, we have it all the way around. And then with the plastic that goes down over top will just be pulled tight across this ring, and that should do it. The only problem is there's only one ring. So when we do the next piece, and I think what we're going to do is leave the next piece for another time and get this one done, because timing is a bit critical.